So now we're going to get into our next topic in the grade 12 computer science course. And to do this, we're going to introduce something new, a concept called an abstract data structure. So an abstract data structure is simply an idea, a concept, or a set of rules to work with data. Now we consider it abstract because it is just an idea. We have concrete data structures, things like arrays and lists, and these are just containers that we use to hold data. Abstract data structures use these concrete ones to implement the idea that it's going to work with. So the first abstract data structure we're going to be looking at is something called a stack. Oops, there we go. Something called a stack. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You've seen them, you've heard of them, and basically it's just when we have multiple items layered on top of one another, but you can only ever interact with the top layer. Well, let's draw a couple analogies just so you get a better concept of the idea. So the first one you might think of is, let's say you're at a restaurant, a buffet restaurant, something like the Mandarin or something along those lines, and when you get up to the food counter, the first thing you need to do is grab a plate. Now, typically at these restaurants, these plates are sitting either inside of the counter itself, and they're level and flush with the countertop, or they're sitting on top of the counter. Let's try and use something similar to the way the Mandarin works. Now, the way the Mandarin works is you have a basically like a countertop here, and there's a hole right here at the center, and it's like a tube that runs down. And at the bottom of this tube is basically like a plate, a solid metal plate of some kind, okay? And this plate is spring-loaded. That's my beautiful spring there. And as more plates get put into the tube, this thing goes down and down and down towards the bottom because the spring gets more compressed. But basically when you're looking at this, you see a plate. Let me just change my colors here. So let's say we have a plate at the top, and then a plate underneath that, a plate underneath that, and a plate underneath that, and a plate underneath that, and so on and so forth. And the idea is that with this system, you can only ever interact with the plate at the very, very top. You can't access anything else deeper in the tube. You can't even see them. You don't even know how many there are. For all you know, that metal plate could be fully extended, and the only thing you see at the top is the one plate that's there. You don't even know. So this idea of only being able to grab a plate from the top is the idea of a stack. And when one of the employees comes in and they need to put more plates onto there, they push the stack down by adding another plate on top. So they're pushing the plate on top of the stack. And when we want to get a plate out of there, we pop it off the stack and then we can use it. We can go put our food on or whatnot. But let's say, for example, hypothetically speaking, you want to access, I don't know, the fourth plate in. Because maybe you're one of those people who say, yeah, I don't know how many people have touched these things. I'm going to go a little deeper. It's the same thing people do with like those straw dispensers and stuff like that. They don't know how many people have been playing with them. So if they want to access that fourth plate in, that means they got to get through the first three plates to get to it. So they're going to pop the top one, pop the top one, pop the top one, and then finally that fourth one there is actually sitting at the top of the stack, and you can grab it. So that's the first analogy of a stack, is this idea of plates in a restaurant. Another one is one that you guys encounter every single day in school. You walk into class and you see you need to get a chair to sit at your desk. So what do? You go to the side of the room and you see the stacks of chairs. And it might look something like, we got a chair on top of a chair on top of a chair on top of a chair. Now the thing is, the way that these things are stacked, you can only ever grab the topmost chair. You have to pull it off, all right? So if you want to get your chair, you pop it off, and then you go and you sit down in your spot. At the end of the day, it's time to stack your chairs again. What do? You go over and you start pushing your chair on top of the current stack that's there. So whenever we're dealing with these stack ideas, what we're thinking of is something along the line of the ordering in which we interact with these things. This ordering goes by an acronym spelled LIFO, which stands for last in, first out. It means the last item that we put on the stack is going to be the first one to come out of the stack. right? That makes sense because you can't access the items below it. So we talked about a number of real-world applications, but what about programming applications? There's actually quite a few. And I'll give you one that will basically spell things out, I think, the easiest for everybody. And that's the idea of your back button in your web browser. Now, you have your web browser over here. It's got a URL bar where everybody types in where they want to go. And then, depending on which browser you're using, you might have a back button that goes like this, and maybe a for button. Well, let's just think about the back button for now. So the way that these basically work is there is a stack of website addresses. And the way we typically visualize our stacks in data is we like to write it like a vertical stack like this. Think of it like an array, where the bottom element is the first element in the array. So imagine how this works. Every time you visit a website, you type your address into the URL bar, and then that address is then recorded in your stack. All right. So every time you leave that page, it's going to get thrown into, let's call this your stack of back operations. Okay. So let's say you go to a few websites. So you might have your first one, and then you might have another one. You've gone through a few of them. Who knows how many you've done? And then you might decide, oh, no, I need to go back to that site. So what happens is you click that back button. And what it does is it comes over to your stack and it pops off that website. That website is then thrown into the URL bar and you're navigated towards your next site. This thing no longer exists inside of the stack. The new top of the stack was the second one that you visited now. So basically every time you go to a new site, it gets pushed onto the stack. Every time you go back, it gets popped off the stack and put back into the URL bar and you go to investigate the new thing. So these ideas that we're looking at, this idea is that abstract data structure. It's that abstract way of dealing with the information. Now, I said in this example here that this was basically an array. Well, the truth is you can actually implement a stack using a number of different concrete data structures. You can also implement them using abstract data structures, which we'll get into later on in the course. But for now, let's just think of it like an array or a list. Same idea, different implementation. So when we're talking about a stack, we're always talking about a few major operations that all stacks perform. But let's focus on the two most important ones. Whenever we want to add another item, to our stack, we call that a push action. Okay? Because we're pushing a new item onto the stack. Whenever we want to remove an item, we say that we're popping the item off the stack. And this is going to give us back the top item. So this gives us back, this returns the top item of the stack and removes it. So it's like you going to pick up that plate off the top of the stack. So you popped it off the stack. You're the employee that works there. You're going to push the plates onto the stack one at a time and depress that spring all the way down to the bottom. So these are our major operations, push and pop. There are a few others that we're going to go into in the next video, but this should get you started for now.